I'm joined on the stage by two business leaders who need little introduction and people who I have watched over many years during my time in live television with CNBC. They cut to the chase, they speak their minds, they say it as it is. Arif Naqvi is the founder and group chief executive of the Abraj Group, one of the leading private equity firms in the world. Abraj is widely recognized as a pioneer of global growth markets, private equity, with over 20 country offices, including 5 regional hubs. And Fadi Ghandour is chairman and managing partner at Wamda Capital and founder and vice chairman of Aramex, a service which I use as well. Please give them a warm welcome.
Okay. Actually, before he starts, I have 2 observations to make. The first is, I've never ever sat on a podium in my life with my legs crossed. So this is very comfortable.
And you're feeling the age.
And the second observation is they headed this up as legacy. And I don't understand what that means because we're both quite young, as you can see. Yusuf.
They asked, yeah, go ahead.
No, Yusuf, by the way.
Now he's going to interview you, by the way.
So the first time I met Yusuf was about 5 years ago. He came to interview me for CNBC. And I don't know if you worked out his height and mine, but there's about a 2-foot differential. And the only way that we could have a meaningful conversation is when he stood on stairs that were 3 stairs below me.
Which his office had, fortunately enough, so we had that arrangement on the staircase. So that brings up the wider question, Arif. I mean, we had a conversation just before we came on stage, and you said that you were here because you went through an awakening of sorts when it comes to this space. Talk us through that.
So, look, awakening is a big word, right? And
you know me, I like big words.
we've kind of been in this space since 2002. There's an interesting story around that, which is Fadi, myself, and about 100 young Arab leaders were in Langkawi in Malaysia back in 2002. And I was in the last stages of investing my first fund, which was $120 million fund at the time, and I had $5 million left, and I was thinking to myself, where should I put this? And we were in a group of young Arab leaders, and there was this one guy who was consistently following me wherever I went.
He's here somewhere.
He's right here, I hope, whose name is Samih Tokan, and there was another person whose name I won't mention, and they were both sort of following me saying, I need that 5 million. And I'm delighted that we actually put money in Maktub back then because we got back close to 20 times our money or whatever that number is. So we did exceptionally well in this space right at the outset.
Right.
To cut a long story short, we grew our business, we did well, and over time we became the largest private equity firm in the world that operates in growth markets. And the thing that I had always been telling my colleagues, and it's a mantra at Abraj, is today's peacock is tomorrow's feather duster. And if you don't evolve and you don't disrupt yourself, you're going to fail. And so about 2 years ago, it hit me that the speed of disruption and technology that was happening, that was going to disrupt every business around the sun. And just by way of simple example, if everybody in this room, when they were coming in, had just given their DNA sample through saliva, walked into this room, and by the time they were leaving, they worked out that fortunately none of us were liable to have cancer, we could self-insure. And by doing that, and by having driverless cars, we could disrupt the entire insurance industry. That's one example. Every industry is going to get disrupted.
Right. So, I mean, let me pick up on that, the global digital disruption, because you've been very vocal about this as well for many years, and even now before we came on, you were like, Yusuf, we need to talk about this specifically. What is it, I mean, in terms of the longer term horizon, where is this heading, and what is it that you would say needs to be watched out for?
Well, I don't know that anyone can talk about the future or where the digital disruption is going to happen. What you need to know is digital disruption is going to disrupt everything that you do, and this is what you need to worry about. My discussion with you earlier also, and the discussion with everyone that I talk to here and outside, is that as you look at the region, and as you see all sorts of political turmoil that happens in the region, and that's a subject nobody wants to really talk about, but the real disruption in the region is not what is happening in the marginal countries where there is political turmoil, but it's in the digital disruption. And this is where our jobs are going to be affected, our future generations are going to be affected, and everything that we do is going to be affected. So the thing that you see here at STEP is that these are the people that are building the disrupting industries that are going to make everything different, and very quickly, by the way. By the accelerated way that disruption is happening is that even if you don't see it today, it doesn't mean it's not there, and it's not going to come and bite you, literally bite you in a couple of years. So it is moving so fast, and we'd better watch out for it. What I do and what Arif is doing and what some others are doing is that we're investing in it and we're betting on it, and we know that it's going to happen. That's what I can tell you about the future, that it is happening, but where is it going? I don't know.
Okay. Arif, you wanted to add to that?
I'm good.
Yeah.
And by the way, one thing Arif didn't tell you is when he met Samih Tuqan, where is Samih? When he met Samih Tuqan, he asked me, which one of the two people should I invest in? And I told him, invest in Samih. You need to know that.
So
it was me telling him that.
So the story doesn't.
So otherwise, he wouldn't have met Samih.
So the story doesn't end there because the story.
Because I had already been an investor in Samih before him.
What he forgot to mention was that
you have a minute to respond.
What he forgot to mention was that 8 months before that, I had invested into his company and taken it off the New York Stock Exchange. But there is a continuation to this story, which is, apart from being my closest blood brother in life, the reality is we've done a lot of things together, okay? And over time, what we have found is that by working together and aligning our interests and actually playing host to a lot of people in this room, we realized back in 2008, 2009, that this was an important element of the MENA ecosystem. Jobs needed to be created, entrepreneurship needed to be developed. So again, what we did then is we created the celebration of entrepreneurship, which was a precursor to what you're doing in this room today. And this is the 4th STEP conference, and I have to tell you, I am beyond delighted to see both the audience and the reality that nothing stops. This is a better life form than that was. We continued our story, and this is important to note because last year, around September, Fadi and I went to Silicon Valley and spent 10 days there, just learning about what was going on.
That was the awakening I was getting to.
Yeah. So call it what you like, man. And it wasn't his first trip, it was my first trip. And over 10 days, I met the good and the great. I met everybody that needed to be met. Whose names you read about, and we met some young entrepreneurs. And then we went and met Uber. And I have to tell you that I was blown away by the quality of the discussion. We met the leadership at the highest level. And as we came out, I turned to Fadi and I said, there is a Middle Eastern competitor, isn't there? And he said, yes, there is. And I said, that's Kareem? He said, yes. I said, do you know the CEO? He said, yes. It was about noontime in San Francisco, midnight in Dubai. I said, could you call him? And he did. And he put me on to him, that's Mudassir Sheikha. And I literally, my first comment to him was, may I please invest in your company?
It's a true story.
It's not only is it a true story, but it is important to understand why that is an important moment. Because when people that deploy capital at scale see a business like that as an opportunity, what you have to understand is that the world is moving towards aggregation. There is one Amazon, there is one Google, there is one Facebook, and there is one Uber. They are aggregating enormous segments of the global community together. However, what they can never do without is local competition. It is local competition that defines how good or bad they are going to be. And because you can't do without that, that local competition is by definition going to do well. I think Kareem is the way of the future. Just like there are many other businesses in different sectors run by people in this room right now who are going to create the great global household names emanating out of this region. And not just this region. It's important to understand that our region is a region sitting over here in Dubai that has 2 billion people around it. And what that means is Africa is our market, India is our market, Central Asia is our market. And therefore, what you are doing here by creating an ecosystem in Dubai in the region is you're creating businesses that have a much larger footprint and a much larger applicability than businesses that started in the US. Silicon Valley, ladies and gentlemen, is not some hypothetical monster with horns on its head. Silicon Valley is an enabling ecosystem. An enabling ecosystem is created when civil society, governments, and business come together and create an alignment that enables innovation to take place by smart people. You are the smart people, Dubai is the enabling environment, and I am the capital.
You're jumping the gun here. You're taking away the whole, the rest of the conversation.
It's okay, man. Then they can ask questions.
Keyword ecosystem. Again, both of you had a front row seat to how this part of the world evolved and became more hospitable to entrepreneurs, although nobody would deny that we still face some serious challenges. Let's perhaps reflect on the progress that has been made over the years. Fadi, how did you witness all of this?
So, if you talk ecosystem, then you need to talk, in my view, infrastructure. So infrastructure is roads, broadband, buildings, airports, seaports, and the startup world. And the startup world is at the core of how you create the next generation of businesses anywhere in the world. And you need to think of it, and governments need to think of it, and everyone needs to think of it, is that this is as essential as anything else. So if you don't invest in it, if you don't build it, if you don't nurture it, if you don't take care of it, it is not going to happen. So these people that are always talking about how risky it is to invest in seed stage and early stage startups, I don't think they should be playing in this game when things happen somewhere else. Because if you don't invest at that very early stage, if you don't throw a lot of capital, a lot of energy, if you don't ease the way businesses actually establish themselves and build businesses and grow across countries, then you are not going to have and you're not going to participate in the future industries that are being disrupted. So it is core. So meaning, just as everyone thinks that you need a road to go from one place to another, and you need an airport to fly from one city to another, you actually need a startup to create the future that countries are going to. Countries need to go into that direction. So you need that global partnership and regional partnership and local partnership that Arif was talking about between capital in the private sector, in the public sector, and in civil society to actually ease the way for people to create businesses. It is essential, and that's what we've been doing.
Yeah.
That's what we've been doing. We've been saying we cannot have an Abraj invest in a Kareem unless someone had invested in the very early days in Kareem. And you cannot have a Maktub unless someone had invested in Maktub very early on. And you cannot have a property finder, which is disrupting the real estate industry, if somebody did not invest in the very early stage. So every business of the future had somebody who bet on them and actually took them there and benefited from the results. And we were told something very interesting in Silicon Valley when we went there, is that if you don't have enough failures in your startup system, then the ecosystem is not happening.
Okay.
So we need to remember that failure is part of success, and a lot of failure is going to be a part of a lot of successes. What happens with failures, Yusuf? And these young, mostly young, and young at heart, I can see you laughing, and you are young at heart, I know. What failure does, it graduates people that are going to create the next generation of businesses, because a failing entrepreneur and a failed entrepreneur has learned lessons that Harvard does not teach you, and that Yale does not teach you, and all these kids that have these big degrees. It is only when you start a business that your degree matters. If you don't, then you can go somewhere else, but the degree does not matter as much as your failure in your business. And that's building ecosystems.
Yeah.
And that is building, and I hope you're not MIT or Harvard grads that you were clapping. Because I tell the guys that I recruit from MIT, I know I have one of them here, he's very tall. It's when he joins a startup that his degree actually will matter on his CV. So otherwise it doesn't matter.
The problem with him is he doesn't know where to stop. Right?
No, but I was competing with
you both say that of each other every 5 minutes.
I knew I'd get in trouble when I'm sitting on a panel with Arif.
I'm walking a very tight line
So
here.
guys, here's the story. Actually,
I don't know when to stop or where to stop.
Well, that's the fun of it, right?
Is it what I'm saying that matters, or
Hush.
it's the time?
So,
I just need to know. To learn.
that's the fourth time I've said so. So, one of the things that I worry about a lot, that does actually keep me up at night sometimes, is that my generation, and yes, we're young at heart and all of that, but my generation and Fadi's generation has actually failed the next generation. And how it has failed the next generation is that we asked our kids to go to university. We worked hard to send them to university, and the reality is when they came out of university, they didn't have jobs, okay? And when they came out of university, they came into 2009 through 13, the biggest financial crisis, a cataclysm, a global cataclysm, a heart attack to the world financial system and manufacturing system. That heart attack was caused by two ways: a failure of the financial system through the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the disruption of the technology created by the startups of the world. As a result, jobs were scarce. And then I started thinking to myself, when we started off as humanity, we were cavemen. We hunted, we gathered. We didn't go from cave 1 to cave 2 and say, may I have a job, please? Right? And so the reality is that we are naturally configured as human beings. Our DNA is configured to go out and do new things. Entrepreneurship is not new. Entrepreneurship is something as old as humanity itself. And because of that, the excitement that one feels by being in a room like this, the excitement that one feels by sort of interfacing with businesses that are starting up and that have capacity to go somewhere and arguably fail, is that it is only by innovating ourselves that we will continue to evolve and be the dynamic life force of tomorrow. So it's very important for all of us to realize that what we do is actually defining the stage of where mankind will be in 15 and 20 years' time. It's very important. So sometimes when you're failing, you may stop and think, I'm not getting money, I'm not getting opportunity, I'm not getting traction. The reality is you're shaping tomorrow.
Okay. Political instability, that's a bit of the elephant in the room. What does it mean for startups, Fadi? Is that an opportunity in a way?
I mean, look, I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and I said, every time we're investing and doing something, they tell you, isn't the Middle East risky and the Arab world risky? And I say, when wasn't it? So if you think the region is risky,
so you would
then you haven't been living here
so you're
for the past 50 or 100 years. This is a region that's risky. And
is it riskier than it was before?
So the definition for risk for somebody living in Silicon Valley and the definition for risk for somebody living in Damascus is completely different, okay? And somebody living in Beirut or somebody living in Dubai. We view the world differently and we look at opportunities. And for those of us who decided that this is the region we want to invest in, so risk is completely looked at differently. So is political instability an issue? It's an issue, but is political instability everywhere? Well, look around Dubai. Is there political instability? No, there isn't. There are 22 countries in the Arab region. There are 4 who are in trouble. Let's focus on the others and let the politicians solve that one because we're not politicians. Let's focus on the 18 countries that are actually thriving and need to have to be invested in. But that's my view of the region. When I started building Aramex in 1982, by the way, Saddam Hussein had a war with Iran and 1 million people died then. People don't remember that. A lot of the guys here don't have a memory that 1 million people died at that time, and we continued to build the business. There was a civil war in Lebanon where 200,000 people were dying, and there was eventually an intifada in Palestine, and everybody asked me the same questions that I'm being asked today in 35 years later. Well, I'm sorry. If you did not invest then you could not have created an Aramex today. So if you don't bet on the region, you're not going to be successful in the region. And for those of us who live here, are investing here, are making money here, and are building the next generation here. So did I talk too much?
You promised not to talk about politics.
But I wasn't talking about politics. I'm saying forget about politics and focus on what matters.
Actually,
let me jump in here for a second. Let me jump in here.
But I haven't finished.
You told me, Arif.
You let him finish.
I'll get back to you in a second. I want to get his voice as well because he's hiding behind the couch.
Is it because he has more money than I do? Because he's able to buy me, I can't buy him.
So we
I'm
started.
not even going to go there. Arif,
We started our business.
you told me 3 years ago, you were worried about this part of the world.
Yes.
So even though, yes, has there been risk for decades and decades in this part of the world? Absolutely. But is it riskier now than it was 10, 15
Look,
years
Abraj-
ago?
Abraj-
That is the
Years
question.
ago, the price
More-
of oil was $10. Everybody's crying about the price of oil. It was $10 at a certain time. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
but
it's-
what? I mean, what? Honestly, what? What?
I'm still coming back. You didn't get this one, all right?
What? So
you know,
explain to him, please.
Abraj was born straight after 9/11. Okay, and the region has gone through multiple levels of turmoil. You can either sit at home, cry, and blame every other extraneous force under the sun and say, this is not going to be good for me to start up a business. Okay? There are two types of people in this world. There are those that open the window, look out, and say, good God, it's morning. Okay? There is another type that open the same window, look out at the same place, and they say, good morning, God. Okay? It's different ways of saying the same thing. This region, as Fadi said, has been unstable for a long time. Business opportunity here is as good, as great, as strong as it has ever been. So the second point around that is, I heard this morning someone say there's no capital available for startups and for businesses. I say that's nonsense. Okay? There is capital available for good ideas and good business. The whole point of starting a business is don't expect everyone to love your idea on day one because you came up with it. There are many ideas that can be screened, but once they've been screened, the availability of capital is just increasing, it's not decreasing. There are more and more firms that are out there that are doing it. We've invested in Wanda, we've invested in Biko, we've invested in Lena Ventures, and in each of those cases been either the largest investor or part of it. Why? For one simple reason, the ecosystem needed capital to start with, we provided it. Now there are enough firms out there that have the ability to gather that capital, and there are enough people outside that are willing to give capital. Second point, countries are by definition animals of their own volition. They have their own foreign policy, they have their own approach, and sometimes cousins can fight, sometimes brothers can fight. The reality is, cities aren't going away anywhere. Okay? Damascus is going to be there long after the borders of Syria are redesigned, and it was there long before Syria was created. In a similar way, the great cities of this region, of emerging markets, what I call global growth markets, are the hub of economic opportunity in the future. Ally that with the fact that the consumer and the global middle class is increasing at an exponential rate. 80% of people in the middle classes are going to come from Asia or Africa over the course of the next 50 years. The majority of urbanization is going to come from these markets. So if you're young now and you want to start a business and you have access to a smartphone, there's never been a better time in history to start a business.
But the question is,
one last second. Put that against the backdrop of what he referred to as business failure and the acceptability of it. Sometimes it's good to fail, and sometimes it's good to do your homework. Don't rely on the need to fail as the reason not to do your homework. And at the same time, we talked about government as an enabling environment. I have said this to government, I have said this on stages like this, and I am going to keep saying it until it changes, because I know I also have the support of many people in government, which is that bankruptcy laws in this country and across the region have got to be altered. The entrepreneur has got to feel that he has the guts and the capacity to be able to go out and fail without needing to go to jail. And that's very important.
We talked a little bit about the global digital disruption, and the reason this ties in with the regional instability is in order for you to reach that next level, in order for you to compete with other centers around the world, you cannot have the kind of turmoil that's happening right now. Yes, a lot of us are used to it, it's not new, but for anybody who's coming to do business here as an entrepreneur and I have a global canvas of choice, right? The region would not currently necessarily be my top choice.
I mean, I think the only reason you're keeping on going is because someone refused you a Syrian visa or something. Politics is on one side and it's not going to go away, Yusuf. Okay.
It's not.
But it's not the definer. The definer is youth. There are more youth in the Arab world. They don't, as Fadi said, need to go to university to be entrepreneurial or creative. And once you create that enabling environment, which Dubai is doing fantastically well, then that reality of encouraging young people from across a region that encompasses a 2 billion people market, we are creating. There was an article in Forbes 2 days ago that Dubai is the archetype city role model of the 21st century. Okay? And the reality is that we are extremely privileged to be a part of government in a country where government learns how to disrupt itself. Okay? This is a country where the government summit a month, 6 weeks ago, they announced a minister of happiness, for God's sake. Okay? The reality is government cares. And if government cares and creates an enabling environment and is listening to you, then we should only worry about here. And the market will take care of itself thanks to the smartphone.
Exactly, but that is just Dubai. Dubai is not representative of the Middle East.
But our market,
this is
thanks
very,
to the
very unique ecosystem that you have
But our market,
here.
thanks to the mobile device, is those 2 billion people.
But
you miss a critical element, that there are 350 million or 400 million people in the region. So what do you want? I mean, do we forget that a market exists with 400 million people? So no matter what happens, these people and this community needs to be served, and it's very simple. And for those of us who decided to stay in the region, we're going to have to build businesses to actually serve them.
Right, but
so what's the point?
The thing is, we're talking about enabling conditions, and enabling conditions includes providing the right financial infrastructure, and the right financial infrastructure is never going to thrive. It's never going to thrive with the kind of instability that you have. The banks are more reluctant to lend. The price what kind of entrepreneur is going to invest in long-term assets, right? So the entrepreneurial mindset
and build businesses. So I agree with Arif, you need to build the enabling environment, but I will ask many entrepreneurs here, no one is waiting for the enabling environment. If it happens, we're all happy that it is going to be a bigger wave of startups, but I haven't seen an entrepreneur, and I see on average 2 or 3 a day because they come looking for funding to talk to me. None of them had in his slides a single slide when he was presenting his business that there is the enabling environment that is stopping me from actually building the business. I don't ask him that question, and it doesn't come out. Okay, there is a regulatory issue that you need to address. It will come out. When I was starting Aramex a long time ago, the post offices told me, you're competing with us, this is a monopoly, and you cannot infringe on the monopoly. And do you think I listened to them? Because if I had listened to the post offices and the regulators, I would not have been in business. I went out and started the business, and the regulator had to catch up to me. And I'm telling regulators, if you don't change now, you're going to have to catch up with the people that are going out and building their businesses, specifically in the digital world. Because in the digital world, the regulator does not have necessarily any control because it sits on the cloud. And if it sits on the cloud, which geography controls it?
Absolutely.
Which geography controls it? So we need to think about that.
So when you say it's okay, leave the enabling environment behind, I have to make this point here because it's important to me. If you look around this room, okay, 99% of the people in this room are expatriates. People who came to make Dubai their home. This is the enabling environment. This is why you came here. This is why you find the opportunity to do business, right? So let's for a second not think about the wider region, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iran, what's happening elsewhere. Let's focus on the fact that here we are creating businesses, creating opportunities, capital is available, the government is entrepreneur friendly, and most important of all, when entrepreneurs get going, jobs get created. Our biggest problem here is jobs. Take any statistical data point from anywhere in the world, governments cannot create enough jobs to keep up with the demand, okay? There are 1 million new people who are entering the workforce in India every single month that are turning 18. That's 1 million people, for God's sake, okay? Or every week. There's some crazy stat out there. These people need jobs or they need to become entrepreneurs. And the reality is that when you start disrupting industry, when you start thinking optimistically about the future, you will create the future. That's just a fact.
What is going to be the catalyst then for the next few years? What is the element or the force that will be able to push this ecosystem to the next level, to the kind of futuristic super hub that you described in that article from a couple of days ago?
Look, it's almost inevitable the way I'm seeing this progression. There was a stage where we needed to build roads, bridges, highways. There was a stage where we needed to have regulations. We haven't got everything perfectly right, nobody ever does, but the directionality of it is that Dubai is going to be able to create that ecosystem. But now, enough about Dubai, okay? Let's focus also about the people. These people that are here in this room today are people that came here in search of a desire to create a new business, in search of a desire to be embraced by people who think that their business is a great business. Entrepreneurs need a lot of love, okay? Entrepreneurs need a lot of mentoring as well, because what they would have got through the job market, working 10 years for someone and then starting their own business, is what this generation is not willing to do. I'm going to tell you a very amusing story. This man over here in 2010 at the celebration of entrepreneurship, I got him to get on a stage and interview Naguib Sawiris. Naguib Sawiris is an Egyptian entrepreneur who's also like us, young at heart, and he felt that because he was in Dubai, he could say anything he wanted. He then decided to jump up and rail against the dictatorships of North Africa, scream and shout. You know, the room was full of young people. And the people that went into Tahrir Square 6 months later were all young people. They're all people that defined the hopes of a new generation. So how it eventually turned out is a different story. But the man from Google who went out and gave all those fiery speeches in Tahrir Square was sitting in the audience that day and cites Naguib as being an inspiration in some of what he was saying out there. So the reality is enabling environment, open spaces, a young generation that is not willing to be pulled back and is willing to go out and express itself. Businesses will be created in that ecosystem that will challenge us all, that will excite us all, and God knows will make a lot of people here very rich.
Yeah. Fadi, your view on what is going to unlock this ecosystem to the next level?
I think we're starting to see the elements of it. So you need a lot of capital. You need a lot of angel and seed stage capital. You need the enabling environment that Arif was talking about, from soft infrastructure to hard infrastructure. You need high speed internet at very, very low cost, which the region is still not having yet. You need the ability to access markets easily. The biggest challenge in the region is that you have 350 million people and a $2 trillion economy that is absolutely fragmented. If companies cannot have access to markets, access to capital, and free movement of people from one place to another, you are not going to have startups that are going to scale quickly, nor are you going to solve the problem of job creation, because scale-ups are the companies that actually create the jobs, and you cannot scale if you don't have markets. And the biggest problem, I tell everyone that is going to ask me, is if Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the GCC is not completely open for free trade and free movement of capital and people, and I would add free movement of startups from one country to another, then you are not going to have that ecosystem. But it is already starting to happen. I think regulators understand it. I think politicians understand it. I think the leadership understand it. And I think at the core of it is Dubai. Dubai is thriving today because it's open, because it embraces everyone, because it tells the smart minds, you don't need to go west, you can come here and build your business, and we are extremely hospitable. And that's why people want to go to Dubai. And that's why in every survey in the world, when you do which country do you want to move to, you say, I want to move to Dubai. And that is about the openness of the city. The rest of the region need to be open, and you need to be hospitable so that you can attract these startups. And finally, you need somebody like Arif Naqvi with a lot of money.
He's getting a bit edgy there. He's like, let me in, I want to say something.
No, he believes. Look, let me tell you something about Arif. When I was starting to do some angel investing, he told me, you're so selfish. You can't be doing this by yourself. And everything that you're going to do, I'm going to have to match you. And we started this angel fund, MENA Venture Investments, which is, in my view, and I can boast a little bit, at the core of of building the infrastructure of angel investing in the region. We ended up investing in 95 companies. My rule to Arif was, don't ask me questions, I'm going to invest. Okay, this is not private equity. How much due diligence I do is my problem.
Right, well,
he said, I trust you completely, go and do what you do. And with all due respect, a lot of what is happening today sits on that basic principle that if you don't invest in the very early stage of companies, the future companies are not going to happen.
Okay, well, next time
And
the opportunity
Souk
comes
is one
up,
of them. The biggest company in the region is at the core of what we've done
if you can
10 years ago.
if you can let me know next time the opportunity comes up, and I'll match you both as well.
So-
All right.
So you're welcome to invest in the fund.
So two things. So two things by way of response to that. One, of course, is that most of the companies that made money, that were suggestions from me. But I would like to just give a small piece of advice to people in the audience, and I'm very conscious of the fact that that meter down there is saying 00. My advice is that as an individual, I have over time in this marketplace, not some marketplace on Mars, but right here in this region, in this marketplace, I have been fortunate to deploy capital alongside some legends in business and found opportunities that have been very profitable. We did that through a diligent application and a process by which we sifted through the nonsense and focused on the good guys. Once we realized that we had the marketplace pretty much covered, we then started looking at other spaces. And when Fadi said that he wanted to do the venture space, personally, I became his partner because Abraj wasn't ready to do it at the time. After that, we conceived WAMDA, and then, as we all know, legendary development, it has become as good as it gets. The reality is that someone like me can deploy capital into different funds, as I mentioned, into different businesses like Souk, like Hepsi Barada, like Big Basket in India, like Kareem. But my role is at a certain point where it can only get to a point where the business is large enough, and then someone like us jumps in. My advice, after that very long preamble, is please, all of you, learn to collaborate. I see too often individual funds, individual companies competing to invest into the same space. I want to be the lead, I want to be the lead. My reality is there's enough money amongst them to be able to put that capital to work properly together. And most important of all, as entrepreneurs, learn to share resources and collaborate, because your growth trajectory is going to be affected by a collaborative culture, not an aggressive culture.
I think that's a great thought to wrap up today's discussion. Thank you very much, Arif and Fadi, and to you for being a lovely audience.